Hi, scholars. We're going to keep reading our book today. Remember, we left off on page 13, but I'm actually going to pick up at the bottom of page 12, the last paragraph. It's right here. Their home destroyed. Their home destroyed. The Baudelaires had to recuperate from their terrible loss in the Poe household, which was not at all agreeable. Mr. Poe was scarcely at home because he was very busy attending to the Baudelaire affairs, and when he was home, he was often coughing so much he could barely have a conversation. Mrs. Poe purchased clothing for the orphans that was in grotesque colors and itched, and the two Poe children, Edgar and Albert, were loud and obnoxious boys with whom the Baudelaires had to share a tiny room that smelled of some sort of ghastly flower. But even given the surroundings, the children had mixed feelings when over a dull dinner of boiled chicken, boiled potatoes, and blanched, the word blanch means boiled, string beans, Mr. Poe announced that they were to leave his household the next morning. Good, said Albert, who had a piece of potato stuck between his teeth. Now we can get our room back. I'm tired of sharing it. Violet and Klaus are always moping around and are never any fun. And the baby bites, Edgar said, tossing a chicken bone to the floor as if he were an animal in a zoo and not the son of a well-respected member of a banking community. Where will we go? Violet asked nervously. I'm going to move this part to the top of the screen. Mr. Poe opened his mouth to say something, but erupted into a brief fit of coughing. I have made arrangements, he said finally, for you to be raised by a distant relative of yours who lives on the other side of town. His name is Count Olaf. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny looked at each other, unsure of what to think. On one hand, they didn't want to live with the Poes any longer. On the other hand, they had never heard of Count Olaf and didn't know what he would be like. Your parents will, said Mr. Poe said, instructs that you be raised in the most convenient way possible. Here in the city, you'll be used to your surroundings, and this Count Olaf is the only relative who lives within urban limits. Klaus thought this over for a minute as he swallowed a chewy bit of bean. But our parents never mentioned Count Olaf to us. Just how is he related to us exactly? Right here, I'm going to move that to the top. Mr. Poe sighed and looked down at Sunny, who was biting a fork and listening closely. He's either a third cousin 4 times removed or a fourth cousin 3 times removed. He's not your closest relative on the family tree, but he is the closest geographically. That's why. If he lives in the city, Violet said, why didn't our parents ever invite him over? Possibly because he was very busy, Mr. Poe said. He's an actor by trade and often travels around the world with various theater companies. I thought he was a count, Klaus said. He's both a count and an actor, Mr. Poe said. Now, I don't mean to cut short our dinner, but you children have to pack up your things, and I have to return to the bank to do some more work, like your new legal guardian. I am very busy myself. The 3 Baudelaire children had many more questions for Mr. Poe, but he had already stood up from the table and with a great slight wave of his hand departed from the room. They heard him coughing into a handkerchief, and then the front door creaked shut as he left the house. Well, Mr. Poe said, you 3 had better start packing. Edgar, Albert, please help me clear the table. The Baudelaire orphans went into the bedroom and glumly packed their few belongings. Klaus looked distastefully at each ugly shirt Mrs. Poe had bought for him as he folded them and put them into a small suitcase. Violet looked around the cramped, smelly room in which they had been living, and Sunny crawled around solemnly biting each of Edgar and Albert's shoes, leaving small teeth marks on each one so she could not be forgotten. From time to time, the Baudelaire children looked at one another, but with their future such a mystery, they could think of nothing to say. At bedtime, they tossed and turned all night, scarcely getting any sleep between the loud snoring of Edgar and Albert and their own worried thoughts. Finally, Mr. Poe knocked on the door and stuck his head into the bedroom. All right, we'll pause right there on page 16 and continue some more tomorrow.